If you were to look for one word that jumps at you whenever you try to read about blockchain or learn about it, the word would be decentralized or decentralization. It is no surprise given that blockchain represents the first real departure from the centralized way of doing things that still defines the classic internet. We have already covered that decentralization is to host a platform or service in multiple hubs at once, rather than to give a single authority all the responsibility for providing content, verifying participants, and enforcing security standards. It is another layer on top of the infrastructure already supporting the World Wide Web, turning those who were once content consumers exclusively into stakeholders in the new status quo. Remember, Web 3.0. Regardless of how a blockchain solution achieves decentralization, it's important to understand why individuals or companies want to pursue this type of structure in the first place. When a blockchain proponent describes the centralized status quo, he or she is describing how most services use a central server or a server bank, which handle traffic coming from around the world. Most of the internet is built on this type of foundation, but it is becoming more centralized over time. Cloud computing increased the growth of this trend by centralizing en masse, which enabled companies to host their services without in-house hardware. Companies like Amazon and Google have become among the few providers of the clouds that serve us all. One huge downside of centralized system is the security concerns. They are never infallible and will always represent a single point of weakness. Decentralization deters break-ins because even if someone manages to penetrate a node, they cannot access the greater network's data, affect it in any way, nor learn anything about its participants. Distributed services are also more desirable because they unseat the entrenched middlemen in the centralized systems. Decentralization is also a deterrent against government action, though this point is not emphasized often. Even if with, say, Bitcoin, it is nigh impossible for any government or central authority to shut down the network. There are many ways to define true decentralization. The best way would be to include physical, political, and algorithmic aspects of decentralization simultaneously in a single implementation. The goal is to give the network's participant equal footing with one another and achieve complete immunization from undue influence both outside and inside. Physical decentralization is the one aspect that most people think of when describing blockchain. And it concerns how many computers make up the collective network. Is it just a handful of nodes like the Neo blockchain, or are there thousands of disparate participants around the world with the blockchain running on their PCs? The more nodes there are and the greater their geographic diversity, the stronger decentralization becomes. However, physical decentralization is no more important than the political decentralization, which describes the degree to which a solution discourages grouping. Decentralization takes many entities to work properly, like the miners who verify and process transactions. Truly decentralized blockchains make it hard for one group to put their interest above another's. Take Bitcoin for example, where miners earn fees for each transaction they process. Obviously, faster transactions are a benefit to all, but the slower they get, the higher fees become as people try to push their payment through first. Therefore, miners' interests are not aligned with users, as they can make more money to the later group's detriment. Such a solution is decentralized but is not sustainable, and it is a sore spot for many of Bitcoin's biggest advocates. They have redeemed themselves by making Bitcoin easier to mine on retail PCs, which slowly reduces the sway of big mining pools. Algorithmic decentralization concerns the protocols that guide a blockchain's ongoing development. Proof of work, for instance, gives more responsibility to participants who can show that they have put effort into the system by mining. However, it's easy to see why companies are moving away from proof of work because it gives more power to those who can build massive mining compounds, which is a factor of electricity costs and other circumstantial advantages. Instead, other blockchains like Qtum favor the proof of stake protocol, which gives those with a larger stake in the chain a louder voice. This idea is one of the most crucial to decentralization because it informs how the blockchain upgrades, fills holes, and improves itself. But pure decentralization is still few years away. Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, understood how difficult it is to achieve true decentralization. He said, "The best solution may be to rely heavily on the one group that is guaranteed to be fairly decentralized, and that group is nobody but the protocol's users. Those who rely on blockchain services to do business or pursue their own passions are the most relevant stakeholders. Though their own interests might not align with those of investors, miners, or developers, whatever benefits them most is also the contributing factor that will likely keep the blockchains that they opt to use both functional and growing." Now that we have covered the whys and whats of the decentralization, let us look at the degrees and levels of decentralization. One of the common confusion that different people have in an organization and likewise in a project is regarding the amount of decentralization each one has visualized for it. It is crucial to form boundaries as to what amount of decentralization an organization or an application might require. Let us look at the degree of decentralization in any organization